at exactly 7:28 a.m. Thursday, April 23, 2026. Freeze that moment, because that's when the illusion cracked wide open. A lone figure steps onto a cold railway platform in Kyiv. No royal convoy, no polished narrative, just Prince Harry gripping his worn Invictus jacket like armor, and suddenly the question starts screaming louder than the silence around him. Where is Meghan Markle? Why the secrecy? And more importantly, who is paying for this sudden transformation from California exile to war zone humanitarian? Because behind this quiet arrival is a thunderstorm of collapsing deals, frozen sponsorships, and a brand that didn't just stumble in Australia, it shattered in public view. Now rewind just 48 hours. Private jet lands in California after what insiders are calling a faux royal tour disaster. Sydney whispers royals for sale. Melbourne responds with indifference so cold it borders on humiliation. No roaring crowds, no Diana-level devotion, just sunbathers who don't even sit up. And that's where the panic begins. Because when a brand built on prestige loses attention, it doesn't fade quietly, it scrambles, it pivots, it reinvents. And suddenly, Harry appears in a war zone, alone, urgent, almost desperate. Coincidence? Or calculated rebranding at its most extreme? The official line says self-funded humanitarian mission, but let's not pretend numbers don't exist. Legal battles are piling up. Montecito lifestyle burning cash daily. So again, who is cutting the checks? Because while the cameras show humility, the ledger tells a completely different story. And that story begins years earlier, quietly, invisibly, in November 2019, when the world believed they were just stepping back. That's when account 00042 was born. Cayman Islands. Silent. Hidden. And within weeks, 11 million starts flowing like a ghost through Dubai, Singapore, and beyond. Let that sink in. While promises were being made to Queen Elizabeth II at Sandringham, promises about not monetizing royal titles, this financial infrastructure was already alive, already moving, already building something far bigger than a simple exit plan. That's not a coincidence. That's timing so precise it feels surgical. And here's where it gets darker. Because by April 2026, that hidden system isn't just sitting quietly, it's operating. Bondi Beach, a tragedy. A memorial, cameras flashing. Meghan arrives appearing to share grief, but behind the scenes, something else activates. A digital machine. Shop the look updates in real time. Every item she wears becomes a product. Every click becomes a commission. And those commissions, they don't land in obvious accounts. They vanish into a shadow network tied back to Cayman. This isn't just branding anymore. This is a mechanism. A 4-step extraction system according to investigators. Activate emotion. Attach the royal title. Generate clicks. Route the money through ghost channels. And when palace advisors saw the data, over 200,000 allegedly generated from a memorial appearance alone, the conversation stopped being about family drama. It became something colder, something legal, something dangerous. Enter King Charles III. Behind closed doors, room 4B, Privy Council office. No cameras, no leaks until now. A black leather file sits on the table. The Cayman dossier. 40 transactions. 11 million pounds. Tracked, verified, undeniable. And then comes the nuclear option, the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917. Not used lightly, not used often, but when it is used, it doesn't warn. It ends things, and Charles doesn't hesitate, because this isn't about headlines anymore, it's about the integrity of the crown. Witnesses describe the room as ice cold. 15 minutes of silence. Then one line, proceed with the draft. That's it. No emotion, no hesitation. A decision that echoes louder than any public statement. But just when you think the story has reached its peak, something even more unsettling emerges. 3 transactions, nearly 2 million, not from offshore, not from Dubai or Singapore, from London, inside the system. Someone, somewhere within reach of the monarchy is feeding this operation. A benefactor, a mole, a shadow inside the palace walls. And suddenly everything shifts, because this isn't just about Meghan anymore. It's about infiltration. It's about betrayal. It's about a system that might be far deeper than anyone expected. Even David Beckham's symbolic distancing, even the comparisons to Princess Diana's legacy, even the public indifference, they all start to look like surface noise hiding something much bigger. So now the titles are hanging by a thread. The accounts are exposed. The palace has made its move. But the real question isn't what has already happened. It's what's about to happen next. Because if there's a mole in London, if the money trail leads deeper, then this story isn't ending. It's just beginning to unravel. And just when you think the damage has already reached its peak, the story twists again. Sharper, darker, more calculated. Because what looked like financial chaos is now starting to resemble something far more deliberate, almost engineered. The narrative shifts from exposure to consequence, and suddenly the palace isn't reacting anymore, it's executing. Quietly, precisely, without emotion. Because by April 28th, the doors of Room 4B didn't just open, they released a mandate that is already moving through the system like a silent shockwave, rewriting identities, erasing titles, dismantling a brand in real time. And here's where it gets chilling. Because while the public is still arguing about headlines, the machinery behind the scenes has already moved on to the next phase, containment. This isn't about embarrassment anymore. It's about risk, institutional risk, legal risk, financial risk, the kind that spreads if not isolated. That's why Meghan is no longer being treated as a controversial figure. She's being processed as a liability, a variable that must be neutralized before the fallout reaches the crown itself. But step back for a second and look at the symbolism that's quietly taken over the entire situation. The $64 candle, a luxury product marketed as elegance, delivered as emptiness. No wick, no flame, just wax. And inside palace corridors, that candle isn't just a defective item anymore, it's become a code, a metaphor whispered among insiders, because it perfectly mirrors what they believe the Sussex brand has become. Visually perfect, strategically packaged, but fundamentally hollow. A promise of light without the mechanism to create it. And the timing of this metaphor couldn't be worse, because as Mother's Day approaches, the marketing machine hasn't slowed down, it's escalated. Reports suggest the use of Archie and Lilibet's royal titles in product promotion, a move that doesn't just bend the original Sandringham agreement, it snaps it completely. That agreement, made with Queen Elizabeth II, wasn't just symbolic. It was sacred. A line drawn in absolute terms, royal status is not a commercial tool. Cross that line, and the consequences aren't personal, they're constitutional. And now, according to insiders, that line has been crossed repeatedly. Not subtly, not accidentally, systematically. Which is why King Charles III is no longer dealing with this as a father figure balancing family tensions. He's acting as a sovereign, protecting an institution. And institutions don't forgive. They don't negotiate with sentiment. They respond to breaches with action. But here's where the narrative fractures into three possible futures, and none of them look clean. The first scenario is total erasure. Titles gone, honors stripped, military links severed. No more duchess, no more prince, just private citizens in a celebrity market that doesn't reward former status. Because without titles, the entire commercial framework collapses. Luxury brands don't pay millions for familiarity, they pay for prestige. And once that prestige disappears, so does the value. The Netflix deals, the partnerships, the exclusivity, it all evaporates into something ordinary. And in a world flooded with influencers, ordinary doesn't survive. The second path is war, legal war. Prolonged, aggressive, exhausting. Insiders suggest that Meghan has already positioned herself for this scenario, framing the situation as institutional targeting, potentially launching a multi-year legal assault designed to keep her name in headlines while forcing the monarchy into defensive territory. It wouldn't be about winning quickly, it would be about dragging the conflict out long enough to extract settlements, attention, and leverage. A strategy built not on resolution but on endurance. But then comes the third scenario, the one whispered quietly, almost reluctantly, because of how devastating it could be. Internal collapse, not public, not immediate, but personal. Rumors are circulating that Prince Harry has sought independent legal counsel, not alongside Meghan, but separate. And within those whispers lies a possibility so explosive it could rewrite the entire narrative that Harry may claim he was unaware of the Cayman operations, that he may position himself not as a partner in the system, but as someone caught inside it. If that happens, everything changes, because suddenly the monarchy has a path to bring him back, not as a rebel, but as a returning son. And to do that, the narrative would need a focal point, a singular architect, someone to carry the weight of the entire operation. And that is where the tension sharpens into something almost unbearable, because it suggests a fracture not just in branding, not just in strategy, but in the relationship itself. And while all of this is unfolding, investigators are still staring at one detail that refuses to fade into the background: those 3 transactions from London. Nearly $2 million. Clean. Direct, internal, proof that whatever this operation is, it isn't isolated, it has roots, it has connections, it has access. Someone inside the system didn't just observe, it contributed. And that changes the stakes entirely, because now it's not just about what was done, it's about who allowed it to happen. And here's the part that should make you pause, because while the public is watching titles disappear and headlines explode, the final pages of the dossier, the ones that haven't been released yet, contain names, dates, fund managers, individuals who haven't been exposed yet. The kind of information that doesn't just damage reputations, it destroys them. So as the legal mandate moves forward, as the titles begin to dissolve, as the financial walls close in, the real story isn't ending. It's narrowing, focusing, moving towards something very specific, because the system doesn't just want closure, it wants accountability. And somewhere behind the scenes, someone is preparing for that moment. Someone who knows that when those final names are revealed, the story won't just shift again, it will detonate.